So picture a man in the early 1930s.
Right, the absolute rock bottom of the Great Depression.
Exactly. I mean, the world is just covered in dust. Bread lines are stretching around city blocks. People are broke, hungry, desperate. Just the crushing reality of trying to survive is everywhere.
It was a brutal time.
Right. And yet, standing right in the middle of all this economic wreckage is a blues piano player. And he's in a sharp suit.
Oh, yeah.
And he isn't singing about defeat at all. He's actually calling himself the High Sheriff from Hell.
And the devil's son-in-law.
Yes. Which is just, it's a jarring image to conceptualize for you as a listener, right? How does a man singing like a folk devil and a street philosopher sound so huge, so untouchable, when the world around him is just brutally unforgiving?
Well, what you're looking at is a masterclass in the psychology of survival.
Right.
I mean, to understand that contrast, you really have to look at the raw data of his life and, his music.
Which brings us right into the Deep Dive classroom. Welcome, Deep Divers.
Welcome.
So we had Team Jelly's Deep Dive AI process, a massive stack of lyrics belonging to William Bunch, who is way better known to the world as Peetie Wheatstraw.
A fantastic pull by the AI.
It really was. And to get those lyrics, we are pulling from the obsessive transcription work of Bob McLeod at Document Records, who literally sat with a typewriter and painstakingly transcribed thousands of these 1930s tracks by ear.
It's incredible dedication.
Unbelievable. And today we are looking at what those lyrics actually reveal. Because look, this isn't some dusty museum lecture about acoustic guitars, right?
No, definitely not.
This deep dive is about how a mythic persona, bold, slippery, half-devil, half-survivor, was forged out of the real, crushing pressures of Black life, labor, and masculinity in Depression-era St. Louis.
And that persona is, it's the most striking element of the data, really.
How so?
Well, Wheatstraw presents himself as completely larger than life. Like, he's mysterious, he's roaming, he's feared, he's admired. He operates on this almost supernatural plane. Yeah, like in the song Peetie Wheatstraw Stomp, he brags that women are going from hand to hand just to be with him.
All right.
And in King of Spades, he claims to be the ultimate card dealer who just entirely commands the game.
I was reading through King Spider Blues from the AI poll, and I was genuinely puzzled by the strategy here. He sings, let me be your king spider, want to build my web on your wall, waiting to catch little flies.
Right, it's very predatory, very bold.
Exactly. I mean, I get the modern comparison to, like, hip-hop swagger or even a pro wrestling heel.
Oh, the wrestling heel is a perfect analogy.
Right, because in wrestling, a heel builds this obnoxious, bulletproof character to generate heat, which translates into ticket sales.
Yes.
But Petey's operating in 1931. So, okay, let's unpack this. Is this just pure unfiltered arrogance, or is putting on this high sheriff from hell persona a necessary survival tactic to avoid being, swallowed whole by the 1930s?
It is absolutely a survival tactic. I mean, it functions as both psychological armor and literally currency.
Currency, like it paid the bills.
Yeah, exactly. Think about the juke joints and house parties in the 1930s. The audience is coming in off a week of backbreaking, humiliating labor.
Right.
They don't just want a musician. They want an avatar of invincibility.
Wow, an avatar of invincibility.
Yeah. By claiming the title of the High Sheriff from Hell, Wheatstraw is projecting absolute authority in a world where Black men had virtually none. He is monetizing the myth.
That makes so much sense.
Right. The bolder the persona, the more records he sells to people who are just desperate for some kind of escapism.
So the swagger literally pays the rent.
It does.
Yeah.
But, you can't maintain that level of supernatural, untouchable energy 24 hours a day.
No, of course not.
When you look closely at the sheer volume of his catalog, the mask eventually has to slip.
And when does it slip?
It slips entirely when he sings about the reality of the labor market. Because underneath that devil's son-in-law moniker, William Bunch was just an itinerant worker. The lyrics reveal this profound exhaustion and labor insecurity. Take Jungle Man Blues, for example. The supernatural predator drops away completely, and he's just a hobo in the jungles.
Okay, wait. The term jungles gets thrown around a lot in Depression-era history, but what did that actually look like on the ground for someone like Wheatstraw?
Well, a hobo jungle wasn't some romantic campsite under the
I
stars.
wouldn't imagine so.
No, these were makeshift, unregulated shanty towns, usually situated near rail yards or city dumps. They were dangerous, disease-ridden, and constantly raided by railroad police.
Just absolutely brutal conditions.
Completely brutal. And in Jumbleman Blues, Wheatstraw sings about being in the jungles for 3 long nights and days, begging for someone to help carry his load.
And what happens?
The response he gets in the song is, "Buddy, I don't want you."
Oh, wow. Buddy, I don't want you. Which really highlights a terrifying reality of that era, right? Like, that isn't just a bruised ego.
No, not at all.
In a survival camp where pooling resources is the only way to eat, being told I don't want you is essentially a death sentence. It's the ultimate gig economy burnout, but instead of missing a rent payment, the stakes are literal starvation.
Exactly. And that pervasive anxiety over survival seems directly tied to the physical toll of the labor available.
Right. The AI pulled this one, doing the best I can. The narrator talks about hating the sound of the New York Central train whistle.
Yes, the train whistle.
But why is a train whistle terrifying to him?
Because that whistle summons him to the roundhouse.
Oh, right.
And a roundhouse is this massive circular facility where train locomotives were serviced and repaired. It was grueling, hazardous, deafening work.
So the whistleblowing meant another day of just destroying your body to make pennies.
Exactly. The gig economy of the 1930s was entirely dependent on your physical output. If you tear a muscle or break a bone in the roundhouse, you don't get sick leave. You starve.
Which explains the sentiment in Poor Millionaire, where he sings that when a man is down, it seems like he ain't no friends at all.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
People treat him like an old ball to be knocked around.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for his sense of self-worth? If your value is tied entirely to your labor, and there is no labor, do you have to invent a new identity just to feel human?
You absolutely do. That equation is exactly why the King of Spades persona was necessary. You invent a new mythical identity to reclaim the agency that the economic system just completely stripped away from you.
Man, that's powerful.
And that lack of agency didn't just stay at the rail yard, It deeply infected his personal life and romantic relationships.
I definitely noticed that in the data. The love songs in this catalog, they aren't sweet. They are battlegrounds.
Total battlegrounds.
Like in Slave Man Blues, he expresses this deep frustration over his subservience to an unfaithful partner. He comes home exhausted from working, and she's sitting there keeping company with other men.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. His reaction to that vulnerability involves pivoting to extreme cinematic violence.
Yes, you see that in Gangster's Blues.
Wait, that's the one where he catches a friend kissing his wife and threatens to tear the man to pieces.
That's the one. Or in Machine Gun Blues, where he tells a woman to speak easy and let my machine gun rest.
So isn't all this violent posturing with a machine gun just a fragile ego trying to protect a broken heart? Why jump from feeling neglected after a long day at work to claiming you have the gangster blues and threatening people with Tommy guns?
I completely agree. It's absolute posturing. But consider the pop culture and news cycle of the early 1930s. The country was obsessed with organized crime.
Oh, sure. Al Capone, John Dillinger.
Exactly. These untouchable gangsters who operated outside the law and just took what they wanted. For a marginalized black worker who is being crushed by the legal and economic systems, adopting the language of the gangster is a way to project absolute power.
Right.
He's claiming dominance in the one space he might have a shred of control, which is his romantic relationship.
So it's a massive defense mechanism.
Yes, but you can see the costume fall away entirely in tracks like All Night Long Blues.
What happens in that one?
Well, there is no machine gun. There is no high sheriff. He's simply a man staying out all night, walking the streets just to keep a woman who drove him from her door off his mind.
Yeah.
The tough guy act just vanishes, leaving this completely vulnerable admission of heartbreak.
It's fascinating how he bounces between these extremes, from a broken-hearted wanderer walking the streets to a supernatural kingpin.
It is.
And to really understand why he needed both ends of that spectrum, we have to look closely at the geography shaping his daily life.
Right. Geography is everything here.
Yeah, St. Louis and East St. Louis keep popping up in the AI data.
Yeah.
Like in the song Little House, he complains about having to leave for Chicago because these St. Louis women are going to let my ham bone spoil.
Right.
Why was this specific Midwestern geography such a pressure cooker for someone like Wheatstraw?
Well, geography is really the key to unlocking this entire narrative. William Bunch was born in Tennessee and grew up in Cotton Plant, Arkansas. And hundreds of thousands of Black Americans during the Great Migration. He moved north, seeking industrial work and escaping the Jim Crow South. But St. Louis was a brutal geographic bottleneck.
How so?
It was the gateway between the river and the rail networks, so migrants flooded into the city expecting opportunity, but instead they found a saturated labor market heavily defined by strict racial segregation.
And it wasn't just economic pressure, right?
Yeah.
There was a deep history of racial violence in that specific area.
Absolutely. The shadow of the 1917 East St. Louis race riots still loomed really heavily over the region in the early 1930s.
It was a massive event.
It was one of the deadliest episodes of labor-related racial violence in American history. So when Wheatstraw is navigating St. Louis, he is operating in a city with a deeply ingrained history of systemic roadblocks, hostility, and literal violence toward Black ambition.
Right, and that context completely changes how I view the songs about gambling and vice.
Yes.
Because we have tracks like Crapshooter's Blues, where he sings about losing everything when the dice won't pass, leaving him stone barefooted and unable to pay rent.
Or Coon Can Shorty playing canasta.
Exactly. I originally read those as just standard party songs, But looking at the systemic roadblocks in St. Louis, it feels more like a desperate economic strategy.
That's because vice was the shadow economy. And for many, it was the only economy available.
Wow.
Think about it. When the factories and the roundhouses aren't hiring because of the Depression or because of segregated hiring practices, how do you pay for a roof over your head?
It's like playing a rigged carnival game. You know the milk bottles are weighted, you know the odds are heavily against you.
Right.
But you aren't playing to win a giant stuffed bear for fun. You're throwing the baseball at the rigged bottles simply because it's the only possible way to buy dinner that night.
That is the perfect mechanism to describe it. The vice is born of sheer necessity. So Wheatstraw isn't just singing about illicit thrills, he is documenting the survival tactics of his audience.
Right, he's reflecting their reality back to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Showing them someone who can navigate the rigged carnival game with style and defiance.
Which brings up a critical point for you, the listener, sitting here today. We aren't riding the rails, dealing with the New York Central train whistle, or playing canasta at a 1932 St. Louis juke joint.
No, we aren't.
So why does dissecting the psychological defense mechanisms of Peetie Wheatstraw matter to someone living in the modern world?
Because Peetie Wheatstraw was doing exactly what modern artists still do today.
Right.
He took the fear, the systemic chaos, and the rejection of his environment, and he alchemized it into style. He turned chaos into identity and pain into something immortal and memorable.
He claimed authorship of his own narrative when the government and the economy gave him zero control.
Exactly.
But what really strikes me is that despite all that armor, he never let the audience forget the fragile human being underneath it. Like, to prove the humanity beneath the folk devil mask, we just need to look at the track, Bring Me Flowers While I'm Living.
Oh, that song strips away every ounce of the myth.
Completely. It is a raw, intensely practical plea for compassion. He's asking for ice for his aching head and love while he's still alive.
And then there's that famous line.
Yes. I don't sure need no flowers in hell. It is such a stark contrast to the guy claiming to be the devil's son-in-law just a few tracks earlier.
He's asking for his humanity to be recognized in the present tense.
Which raises an important question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do we wait until someone is gone to give them their flowers instead of sitting with them in the trenches while they're fighting for survival?
It's a heavy thought.
It really is.
Shoot.
So let's synthesize the data we've pulled from this deep dive.
Sure. Well, beneath the devil's son-in-law was William Bunch, a man who used a piano, a sharp suit, and a massive mythic persona to armor himself against the crushing economic and racial realities of Black life in the 1930s.
Right.
He sang about the devil, but he was really singing about survival. And that leaves us with a final thought to really mull over. Because what's fascinating here is, if Peetie Wheatstraw had to build the high sheriff from hell just to survive his era, what kind of armor are you building today to survive yours?
Oh, that's good.
And more importantly, who is the person hiding underneath it?
That is definitely something to carry with you this week. We want to thank you for stepping into the Deep Dive classroom today.
Thanks for having me.
With our signature Team Jelly flair, we remind you to hit like, subscribe, and utilize those affiliate links to keep the Deep Dive AI servers running.
The AI requires a constant stream of data,
Always. And be sure to check out our exclusive Fourth Wall merchandise and drop your suggestions in the comments below. Let us know which historical figures or musical sources you want Team Jelly to unpack next.
We read them all.
We absolutely do. Next time in the Deep Dive Classroom, we will be tackling another massive stack of sources, promising you another fascinating shortcut to being the most well-informed person in the room. Until then, look closely at the personas the world presents to you. We'll see you next time.